Founded in 1957 by just 13 friends in Maryland, the Pagans Motorcycle Club began as a peaceful riding group before evolving into one of America's most powerful outlaw biker organizations. At its peak, the club reportedly grew to nearly 5,000 members, controlling much of the East Coast through a tightly centralized leadership known as the Mother Club. Federal investigators have linked the organization to violent gun wars, major RICO investigations, methamphetamine trafficking, alliances with the Philadelphia Mafia, and deadly clashes with rivals like the Hells Angels. From the infamous 2002 Long Island Massacre to the modern Blue Wave expansion under Keith Conan Richter, this is the complete story of power, violence, loyalty, and survival behind one of America's most feared motorcycle clubs. The story of the Pagans Motorcycle Club begins very differently from what most people expect. Long before the club became linked to organized crime and violent rivalries, it started as a small group of motorcycle enthusiasts who simply loved riding together. The club was established in 1957 and officially organized in 1958 in Prince George's County, Maryland. It was founded by Lou Dobkin, whose surname is also recorded in many law enforcement files as Dobkins. Unlike the typical image of an outlaw biker, Dobkin had served as a medic in the United States Navy and later worked as a biochemist at the National Institutes of Health. Together with 12 close friends, he created a 13-member riding club focused on weekend road trips, working on motorcycles, and enjoying the strong sense of brotherhood shared by many veterans after World War II. In those early years, there was little to suggest that the Pagans would one day become one of America's most well-known outlaw motorcycle clubs. The members were not involved in violent crime or organized criminal activity. Instead of wearing intimidating leather cuts with large three-piece back patches like many West Coast clubs, they rode in simple blue denim jackets decorated with hand-embroidered club insignia. Their motorcycles included both American Harley-Davidsons and British Triumphs as they traveled through the scenic back roads of Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. For nearly 8 years, the Pagans remained a peaceful riding club that stayed away from criminal activity and avoided conflicts over territory. Everything began to change in 1965. A wave of younger and more rebellious members joined the club, bringing a very different attitude. Their influence slowly shifted the Pagans away from casual touring and toward a tougher outlaw identity. That transformation became impossible to ignore during a chaotic motorcycle racing event in Maryland, where a heated confrontation between club members and local police drew widespread media attention. Newspapers described those involved as belonging to the troublesome 1% of motorcyclists who caused problems. The phrase was linked to the American Motorcyclist Association's reported statement that 99% of motorcycle riders were law-abiding citizens. Instead of distancing themselves from the negative publicity, the Pagans chose to embrace it. According to the club's own history, they designed and adopted the famous diamond-shaped 1% ER patch as a direct response to those newspaper stories. They claim to have worn the emblem before it became the widely recognized symbol of outlaw motorcycle gangs across North America. Once the 1% patch became part of the club's identity, the Pagans completed their transition from a recreational riding group into a full-fledged outlaw motorcycle gang. To reinforce this new direction, the Pagans introduced a formal constitution during the mid-1960s that created a centralized leadership structure. One of its most unusual provisions stated that the national president would receive an annual salary equal to that of the President of the United States, which at the time was $100,000 a year. Club leaders openly described the decision as a show of class, reflecting the growing confidence and ambition of the organization's leadership. The next major turning point came when the Pagans expanded into central Pennsylvania. There they encountered one of the region's most powerful motorcycle clubs, the Sons of Satan Motorcycle Club. Based in Lancaster County, the Sons of Satan had more than 100 heavily armed members, led by John Satan Maron. As the Pagans moved deeper into Pennsylvania during the mid-1960s, many expected a violent territorial war between the two organizations. Instead, Pagans President Fred Dutch Burrs quietly opened negotiations with Maron. Both leaders understood that a prolonged conflict would weaken their clubs and waste valuable resources. Rather than fighting, they reached an agreement that would permanently reshape the Pagans. Maron and his trusted inner circle officially patched over and became full members of the Pagans. The remaining Sons of Satan members were reorganized into an official support or puppet club. That support structure continues to exist today, with members wearing a distinctive P patch on their cuts to show complete loyalty and operational support for the Pagans. Soon after the merger, John Satan Maron became the national president of the Pagans. He proved to be a highly organized and ambitious leader who transformed the club from a loose collection of local chapters into a disciplined organization with a corporate-style structure. Throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s, Maron pushed rapid expansion through aggressive recruiting and by absorbing smaller motorcycle clubs into the Pagans. At its height, the organization reportedly grew to nearly 5,000 members, spread across the eastern United States, making it one of the largest and most influential outlaw motorcycle clubs of its era. The mechanics of power, mother club governance, and visual identity. The Pagans Motorcycle Club has a leadership system that is very different from most other major outlaw motorcycle clubs in North America. While groups like the Hells Angels and the Outlaws give their local chapters a fair amount of independence, the Pagans operate under a highly centralized chain of command. Every major decision comes from a single ruling body known as the Mother Club, giving the national leadership complete control over the organization. The Mother Club is made up of exactly 13 senior members who oversee every aspect of the club's operations. They establish national policies, handle internal discipline, control finances, approve acts of violence, oversee chapter charters, and personally appoint every chapter president and vice president. Regular members have no vote when it comes to national decisions. Orders flow from the top, and every chapter is expected to follow them without question. Members of this elite leadership circle are recognized by a distinctive black 13 chateau patch displayed on the front of their blue denim cuts. To make it harder for federal investigators to target the club's leadership, the Pagans developed a system that has helped them avoid constant surveillance for decades. Unlike many organizations, the Mother Club does not operate from a permanent headquarters. Although its leadership has traditionally been based around central Pennsylvania, Delaware County, and the greater Philadelphia area, meetings are regularly moved across different states. By constantly changing locations, the club makes it far more difficult for law enforcement to conduct long-term surveillance, secure wiretap approvals, or carry out search warrants against its top leadership. Keeping such a tightly controlled organization together also requires a strong enforcement system. That responsibility falls to the National Sergeant at Arms, one of the most powerful positions within the club. He has the authority to personally select 13 trusted enforcers from chapters across the organization. These men are known as the Regulators, and they serve as the Mother Club's own internal enforcement team. According to law enforcement, Their role is to maintain discipline through intimidation and violence, collect unpaid dues from members, deal with anyone accused of disloyalty, and carry out attacks against rival organizations whenever ordered. A pagan member's identity is closely tied to the vest they wear, commonly known within biker culture as a cut or cut-off. These blue denim vests display embroidered patches, known as colors, on both the front and back. The centerpiece of the back patch is one of the most recognizable symbols in outlaw motorcycle culture. It features the Norse fire giant Surt, seated on a blazing sun while holding a massive flaming sword. Above the image is the word Pagans, displayed in bold red, white, and blue lettering, creating one of the most recognizable club insignias in North America. The story behind that famous logo is just as unusual as the club itself. The image of Surt was not originally created for the Pagans. It came directly from an illustration by legendary comic book artist Jack Kirby for Marvel Comics' Journey into Mystery, issue number 97, released in October 1963. Written by Stan Lee and illustrated by Kirby, the comic introduced Surtur as a powerful fire giant capable of bringing about the destruction of Asgard. The Pagans adopted Kirby's artwork almost exactly as it appeared, using the mythological warrior as a symbol of strength, destruction, and the aggressive identity the club wanted to project. For many years, the Pagans also followed a unique policy that puzzled both rival motorcycle clubs and law enforcement agencies. Most outlaw motorcycle clubs require full patch members to wear a traditional three-piece patch set consisting of a top rocker with the club name, a center logo, and a bottom rocker identifying the rider's home city or state, such as New York, Philadelphia, or California. The Pagans intentionally refused to wear a button rocker showing any specific location. That decision offered a significant tactical advantage. Whenever police officers or gang investigators spotted pagan riders on the road, they had no easy way of identifying which chapter or state those members belonged to. This made it much more difficult for different law enforcement agencies to share intelligence, track members across state lines, or build accurate regional crime profiles. In recent years, however, as the club expanded under modern leadership, the Pagans gradually adjusted this long-standing tradition. Some members now wear a generic East Coast, bottom rocker, or other regional identifiers, while still keeping the iconic Surtur emblem as the centerpiece of their colors. Despite the image of brotherhood and freedom often associated with motorcycle clubs, investigators argue that the reality is far different. Veteran gang investigator Steve Cook has said that charity rides, toy drives, and other community events organized by outlaw motorcycle clubs are carefully planned public relations efforts. According to Cook, these events help create a positive public image while drawing attention away from what law enforcement believes are the club's year-round criminal activities. As he explains, those alleged activities include manufacturing narcotics, trafficking untraceable firearms, stealing motorcycles, collecting street taxes through violence, and carrying out organized racketeering operations. The methamphetamine connection, the Pagans, the Mafia, and a powerful criminal network. One of the defining features of the Pagans Motorcycle Club was its long-standing relationship with traditional Italian-American organized crime, particularly La Cosa Nostra families based in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, New York, and northern New Jersey. While other outlaw motorcycle clubs occasionally worked with mafia figures on individual deals, the Pagans developed a much deeper partnership. According to law enforcement investigations, that relationship evolved into a structured criminal alliance that played a major role in the mid-Atlantic drug trade for more than 3 decades. The partnership reached its strongest point during the 1970s and 1980s in Philadelphia. At the time, the Philadelphia crime family was led first by Angelo Bruno, widely known as the Docile Don, and later by Nicodemo Little Licky Scarfo. Mafia rules officially banned made members from participating in narcotics trafficking, but investigators say Bruno often overlooked profitable drug operations as long as the family received a share of the money. When Scarfo took control, that restraint largely disappeared. His organization aggressively pursued control of regional drug markets and became known for using extreme violence to protect its interests. The key figure connecting the Philadelphia Mafia and the Pagans was Raymond Long John Martirano, a powerful made member of the Scarfo crime family. Martirano became one of the organization's biggest earners and helped build a criminal alliance that included the Philadelphia Mafia, the Pagans Motorcycle Club, the K&A Gang, an Irish-American organized crime group, and the Philadelphia Greek mob, led by Chelsea Steve Boris. Working together, the Philadelphia Mafia and the Pagans allegedly established near-total control over the production and wholesale distribution of methamphetamine across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and Delaware. Their advantage came from controlling the supply of phenol 2-propanone, commonly known as P2P, a chemical that was a key ingredient in producing high-purity methamphetamine before tighter regulations were introduced. The organization operated through a carefully divided system in which every group had a specific role. The Philadelphia Mafia used its international shipping contacts, corrupt union connections, and commercial import businesses to bring large quantities of industrial P2P into the country. Once the chemicals arrived, Mafia member Raymond Martirano acted as the main middleman, arranging deliveries of thousands of gallons of P2P directly to senior leaders within the Pagans Mother Club. The Pagans then used their network of rural chapters throughout central Pennsylvania, the Laurel Highlands, and the isolated Pine Barrens of South Jersey to set up hidden methamphetamine laboratories. According to federal investigators, these labs were often located in remote farmhouses, protected by armed club members, where experienced pagan cooks converted the chemicals into crystal methamphetamine. After production was complete, the Pagans relied on their chapters across multiple states to move the finished product to regional dealers, street gangs, and other criminal organizations. In return for receiving a reliable supply of precursor chemicals and protection within major cities, investigators allege that the Pagans paid millions of dollars in drug profits back to the Philadelphia Mafia, making the partnership highly profitable for both sides. During the same period, Nicky Scarfo introduced what became known as a mandatory street tax. Bookmakers, loan sharks, drug dealers, pimps, and other criminals operating in Philadelphia and South Jersey were expected to make weekly payments to the Mafia. Those who refused often faced deadly consequences. Independent loan shark John Calabresi was murdered by Scarfo's hitmen, while Greek mob boss Steve Boris was shot and killed in a South Philadelphia restaurant in 1981 while dining with Raymond Martirano. The Pagans, however, were reportedly not required to pay this street tax. Law enforcement investigators believe their importance as large-scale methamphetamine producers, combined with their reputation for organized violence, allowed the Mother Club to negotiate with the Philadelphia Mafia as a business partner rather than as a subordinate criminal group. Instead of paying protection money, both organizations reportedly shared the enormous profits generated by the mid-Atlantic methamphetamine trade. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, federal authorities began dismantling that system. Stronger controls on chemical precursors made P2P much harder to obtain, while major RICO prosecutions resulted in the convictions of Nicky Scarfo and several of his top associates. As those investigations weakened the traditional supply chain, the Pagans were forced to adapt by expanding into other forms of organized crime. Federal indictments filed over the past 2 decades alleged that the club broadened its criminal activities in several directions. One area involved illegal prescription pill operations. Investigators claim members managed large-scale distribution networks in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, moving hundreds of thousands of oxycodone and hydrocodone pills through corrupt medical professionals. Authorities also allege that the club shifted toward importing finished crystal methamphetamine, working with Mexican drug cartels to bring high-purity meth into the United States for distribution along major East Coast highway corridors. Federal cases have further accused the organization of trafficking illegal firearms and explosives. Investigators allege that members sourced untraceable weapons, fully automatic conversion devices, submachine guns, and improvised explosive devices, supplying local street gangs, while also using those weapons to strengthen and defend the club's territorial influence. Blood on the East Coast, gang wars, forced patchovers, and the Long Island Massacre. Among American outlaw motorcycle clubs, federal agencies such as the FBI and ATF have long recognized 4 organizations as the Big Four: the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, and the Pagans Motorcycle Club. While all 4 have built reputations for violence and organized crime, the Pagans followed a very different strategy when it came to expanding their influence. Unlike the Hells Angels, Outlaws, and Bandidos, which spent decades establishing chapters across Europe, South America, Australia, and Asia, the Pagans focused almost entirely on the United States. Historically, the club operated only in the US South and Puerto Rico, choosing not to build an international presence. Instead, it concentrated its strength along the East Coast, stretching from New York down to Florida. By keeping its members in one region, the Pagans created a powerful network that controlled key territory and made it extremely difficult for rival motorcycle clubs to gain a foothold. That strategy also meant that any attempt by another club to move into the East Coast often led to violent conflict. No rivalry became more intense than the one between the Pagans and the Hells Angels. As the Hells Angels expanded into areas such as New York, Long Island, and Philadelphia during the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Pagans viewed the move as a direct challenge to territory they considered their own. According to investigators, the Mother Club responded with carefully coordinated acts of violence to defend its influence. The most infamous clash took place on February 23, 2002, at Vanderbilt Hall in the Long Island communities of Plainridge and Farmingville. That day, the local Hells Angels chapter was holding its annual Hellraiser Ball, a popular motorcycle and classic car event attended by hundreds of visitors, vendors, and bikers from across the region. Believing the gathering represented an unacceptable expansion into their traditional territory, the Pagans organized a large-scale attack. Authorities say a convoy of 73 Pagans and their associates traveled from several chapters in New Jersey and Pennsylvania to Long Island. Armed with baseball bats, machetes, knives, brass knuckles, and concealed handguns, they stormed the event around noon. The violence erupted almost immediately. As the attackers entered the building, Pagans members rushed through the front entrances, assaulting Hells Angels members while smashing vendor displays and creating panic throughout the hall. The fight quickly spread from inside the venue into the parking lot. As the confrontation escalated, members of both clubs reportedly drew handguns, turning the brawl into a deadly gun battle. During the exchange, Pagan member Robert Proby Reynolds was shot and killed inside the hall by a Hells Angels member. More than 10 other people suffered serious injuries, including gunshot wounds, stab wounds, and blunt force trauma. The scale of the violence brought a massive law enforcement response. Dozens of police units surrounded the area, secured the scene, and recovered a large number of abandoned firearms, knives, bats, and other weapons. Authorities arrested all 73 pagans involved either at the scene or shortly afterward. Where was the fire, the leave? The investigation later resulted in major federal RICO conspiracy indictments that significantly weakened the club's active mid-level leadership in both New York and New Jersey. The Pagans did not rely only on violence against national rivals to protect their territory. They also maintained control by pressuring smaller, independent motorcycle clubs throughout Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey. According to investigators, local pagan leaders often approach these clubs with a simple but harsh choice. Members could surrender their existing colors and officially patch over to become full pagans, join an approved support club under pagan control, or face violent consequences that allegedly included clubhouse attacks, fire bombings, and repeated assaults. Over time, this strategy helped the pagans absorb or eliminate several smaller motorcycle clubs throughout the region. Groups such as the Breed and the Warlocks in parts of South Jersey and Pennsylvania reportedly lost members through forced patchovers, allowing the pagans to expand their influence and strengthen their hold across the East Coast. Resurgence and takedown. The Blue Wave and the fall of Keith Conan Richter. After suffering major setbacks in the early 2000s, the pagans entered a quieter period. Federal RICO prosecutions following the Long Island Clubhouse War, along with large-scale drug investigations, sent dozens of senior members to prison and disrupted the club's leadership. For several years, the organization kept a lower profile. But by 2018, investigators say the pagans were rebuilding through an aggressive expansion campaign known inside the club as the Blue Wave. The driving force behind that effort was Keith Conan Richter, often referred to in underworld circles as Conan the Barbarian. Richter became the club's national president after serving 16 years in federal prison for racketeering-related offenses, including conspiracy to commit murder and aggravated assault in aid of racketeering during the violent conflicts of the late 1990s. After his release, he returned to the organization with a plan to rebuild its strength and expand its reach. Under Richter's leadership, the pagans made several major changes to the way the club operated. One of his biggest priorities was rapid recruitment. The club shortened its traditional prospect period, allowing local chapters to bring in new members much faster than before. Investigators also alleged that smaller street gangs were encouraged to patch over into the pagans, helping increase membership in a relatively short period. The club also pushed aggressively into new territory. Testimony presented before the New Jersey legislature stated that the number of active pagan chapters in the state grew from 10 to at least 17 within just 3 years under Richter's leadership. During that same period, active membership in New Jersey reportedly exceeded 300, while nationwide membership grew to more than 900. Perhaps the biggest change came with the club's geographic expansion. For decades, the pagans had focused almost entirely on the East Coast. Richter broke with that tradition by approving new chapters in California, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Michigan, Indiana, Missouri, and Puerto Rico, bringing the club into regions where rival motorcycle gangs had long held influence. According to law enforcement, the Blue Wave also coincided with a rise in public violence. Investigators linked the period to drive-by shootings targeting rival clubhouses, violent assaults on rival members in public locations, and aggressive extortion schemes aimed at local business owners. As the club expanded, federal authorities responded. with a large, coordinated investigation. The operation brought together the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, the DEA's New Jersey Division, the New Jersey State Police, and several regional prosecutors' offices, all working to dismantle the organization's leadership. The investigation reached a turning point during the weekend of February 20th, 2021. The Pagans were holding a large national gathering in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where federal agents and state police placed the event under both physical and electronic surveillance. Investigators observed Richter meeting with senior Mother Club officials and chapter leaders who had traveled from across the country. During the operation, authorities received information that Richter was carrying a firearm illegally. At approximately 11:10 p.m. on February 20th, Richter left the gathering as a passenger in a white GNC SUV, driven by another Pagan member. The vehicle headed east toward his home in Bayshore, Long Island. Around 1:30 a.m. on February 21st, 2021, law enforcement officers carried out a planned traffic stop after the SUV crossed into Mercer County, near East Windsor, New Jersey. A detailed search of the vehicle uncovered a loaded Ruger .345 caliber handgun hidden inside a custom-built compartment beneath the center console cup holder. Because Richter had previously served 16 years in federal prison for violent racketeering offenses, he was legally prohibited from possessing a firearm. According to federal prosecutors, that violation became the foundation of a major federal case under Project Guardian. Federal arrest warrants were executed on February 26, 2021. Faced with the evidence, Richter pleaded guilty in July 2021 during a video conference hearing before U.S. District Judge Kevin McNulty in Newark. He admitted to the charge of being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. On October 14, 2021, Judge McNulty sentenced the 62-year-old national president to 33 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release with no possibility of parole. Richter's conviction dealt a serious blow to the Blue Wave campaign. The Mother Club quickly reorganized its leadership, handing control of the organization to senior officials. Law enforcement intelligence later identified longtime member Cletus Ayers as the club's new national president. At the same time, federal prosecutors continued expanding their investigations into pagan operations across the country. In December 2020, a federal grand jury in Pittsburgh returned indictments against 30 Pagans members and associates, including senior figures Bill Rana, Eric Arms, Jason Evans, Cody Bonanno, Philip Bonanno, Dominic Couture, and Mark Stockhausen. Prosecutors charged the group with large-scale narcotics trafficking and firearms offenses following the seizure of significant quantities of drugs, 12 firearms, and approximately $28,000 in cash and jewelry. Structural dynamics and analytical frameworks. By this point, the evolution of the Pagans Motorcycle Club reveals a unique organizational model that differs in several important ways from other major outlaw motorcycle clubs. To better understand those differences, the following comparison breaks down how the Pagans operate alongside their biggest rivals, highlighting their leadership structure, internal rules, methods of expansion, and the criminal activities that have been linked to each organization. Comparative profile: the Big Four outlaw motorcycle clubs. Insert comparison table or graphic here. Conclusion and strategic outlook. A close look at the history of the Pagans Motorcycle Club shows an organization that has repeatedly changed its methods to protect its leadership, expand its influence, and preserve its criminal operations despite decades of pressure from law enforcement. One of the biggest reasons for the club's longevity is its highly centralized leadership structure. Rather than giving local chapters significant independence, the Pagans place national authority in the hands of 13 senior leaders, known as the Mother Cub. Because this leadership group has no permanent headquarters and regularly changes meeting locations, investigators have long argued that it is much harder to monitor through traditional surveillance, wiretaps, and local police investigations. The club also developed several tactics designed to make law enforcement's job even more difficult. For many years, pagan members refused to wear bottom rockers, showing their city or state. That simple decision made it much harder for investigators to identify which chapter a rider belonged to, map the club's territorial reach, or coordinate intelligence between different agencies along the East Coast. Another factor that separated the Pagans from many rival motorcycle clubs was their long-standing relationship with traditional organized crime. Rather than operating entirely on their own, investigators say the club built a profitable partnership with La Cosa Nostra, particularly the Philadelphia crime family, under Angelo Bruno and later Nicky Scarfo. According to federal investigations, that alliance allowed both groups to control the supply of P2P precursor chemicals, helping them dominate much of the methamphetamine trade throughout the Mid-Atlantic region for many years. The club has also shown a remarkable ability to recover after major federal investigations. Large RICO prosecutions following the 2002 Long Island violence and the federal case against National President Keith Conan. Richter in 2021 significantly disrupted the organization. Even so, initiatives such as the Blue Wave demonstrated how quickly the Pagans could recruit new members, establish additional chapters, and expand into new territory. That ability to rebuild has remained one of the club's defining characteristics. Today, federal agencies continue to investigate pagan chapters through coordinated task force operations across the United States. Despite years of arrests, prosecutions, and leadership changes, the organization has continued to survive by adapting to new challenges and restructuring its operations whenever necessary. From a small riding club founded by 13 friends, wearing blue denim jackets in Maryland, the Pagans grew into one of the most influential and closely watched outlaw motorcycle clubs in America. Their history is a story of changing leadership, shifting alliances, violent rivalries, and constant adaptation, one that continues to attract the attention of law enforcement agencies and organized crime investigators across the country.
By the late 1960s, Southern California was a place full of tension and change. The picture-perfect image of post-war America was beginning to crack. Civil rights movements were gaining momentum. Anti-war demonstrations filled the streets, and thousands of Vietnam veterans were returning home carrying the physical and emotional scars of war. It was during this turbulent period, on December 5, 1969, in Montebello, California, that 10 men came together to create what would eventually become one of the most feared, enduring, and influential outlaw motorcycle clubs in history, the Mongols Motorcycle Club. The Mongols were founded for more than just a love of powerful American motorcycles. Their creation was also a response to the racial barriers that existed within the outlaw biker world at the time. The dominant club of that era, the Hells Angels, which had been founded in Fontana in 1948, did not allow non-white members to join. Many of the Mongols' founders were Hispanic men from East Los Angeles who wanted the brotherhood, loyalty, and sense of belonging that came with the biker lifestyle, but found themselves shut out because of who they were. The club's first national president, Louis Costello, selected the name Mongols as a reference to Genghis Khan and the unstoppable expansion of the medieval Mongol Empire. The choice was deliberate. It was a message to the outlaw biker community that this new club had no intention of following anyone else's rules or respecting territory simply because someone else claimed it first. One of the 10 original members was Alfonso Big Al Aceves, who served as the club's first sergeant-at-arms. Aceves was no ordinary biker. He was a highly decorated combat veteran who had completed 3 tours in Vietnam with the famed 101st Airborne Division. Like many soldiers returning from the war, he found it difficult to adjust to civilian life. The society he came back to often seemed disconnected from, and sometimes even hostile toward, the experiences that had shaped him on the battlefield. The influence of veterans like Aceves became deeply woven into the club's identity. Their military training, discipline, tactical thinking, and hardened mindset helped shape the foundation of what would become the Mongol nation. The club functioned as far more than a riding group. It developed into a close-knit, almost paramilitary brotherhood, built to survive challenges from rival clubs and law enforcement alike. For men such as Aceves, who struggled through periods of street violence, heroin addiction, and armed debt collection, before eventually finding religious redemption years later, the Mongols provided something many of them could not find elsewhere, a place where their experiences were understood. It became a world of its own, where loyalty came before everything else, and where the bonds between members often felt stronger than those found outside the club. Within a decade of its founding, that combination of military-style organization and strong Chicano solidarity helped the Mongols spread rapidly throughout Southern California. What started in East Los Angeles soon expanded into the San Gabriel Valley, the San Fernando Valley, Long Beach, San Diego, and Bakersfield. At the same time, the club actively recruited from prisons, particularly the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo. This strategy ensured a steady flow of hardened, anti-establishment recruits who helped fuel the club's growing influence and expansion. Chapter 2. The Meaning Behind the Colors, Rules, Code 55, and the 1%er Lifestyle. To most people, a biker's leather or denim vest looks like nothing more than a collection of patches sewn together over time. But inside the world of 1%er outlaw motorcycle clubs, every patch has meaning. Every stitch tells a story. What may look random to outsiders is actually a carefully structured system of rank, territory, identity, and loyalty. The term 1%er has been part of biker culture for decades. It comes from a statement made by the American Motorcyclist Association, which claimed that 99% of motorcycle riders were law-abiding citizens. Rather than reject the label, outlaw bikers embraced it. They proudly adopted the 1% title as a symbol of living outside mainstream society and refusing to follow its expectations. For the Mongols MC, appearance is not left to personal choice. The club follows strict visual and constitutional rules that define exactly how members present themselves. Their colors are built around a black and white design, making them instantly recognizable. At the center of that identity is the club's famous back patch, a cartoon-style Mongol warrior representing Genghis Khan. The figure wears sunglasses, bell-bottom pants, carries a curved scimitar sword, and rides a customized chopper motorcycle. Earning the right to wear those colors is not something that happens overnight. For members of the Mongol nation, it is a long process that can take years. Every step involves proving loyalty, commitment, and the ability to handle pressure. The club uses the traditional three-piece patch system, and each piece carries its own importance. Within outlaw biker culture, the three-piece patch is much more than decoration. It represents territory and authority. A one-piece patch is usually worn by riding clubs that do not claim territory and are not viewed as a threat by established clubs. A two-piece patch often identifies a club that is working toward recognition, but a three-piece patch, especially one displaying a state's name on the bottom rocker, sends a very different message. It is a declaration that the club claims authority and presence within that geographic area. The road to earning that three-piece patch starts with becoming a prospect. Prospects are essentially the chapter's support crew and frontline workers. They have no voting rights during church, the club's highly secretive weekly business meetings. They are also forbidden from wearing the top rocker or the center patch that full members display. Life as a prospect is designed to test commitment. Prospects are expected to handle routine errands, take on difficult and sometimes risky assignments, stand guard over motorcycles during events, and prove that their loyalty to the club is absolute. Every action is watched closely, and every decision becomes part of the evaluation process. Behind the scenes, the Mongols operate under a formal 70-page constitution, along with 10 core commandments that govern member behavior. These rules cover nearly every aspect of club life, from motorcycle ownership to personal conduct. One requirement is that members must own an American-made V-twin motorcycle, with Harley-Davidson models being the overwhelming favorite within the club. The Constitution also contains strict rules about conflicts between members. Internal disputes are not allowed to escalate into armed confrontations. Members are forbidden from fighting one another with weapons. If disagreements arise, they must be settled face-to-face without weapons. Violating this rule can result in a $1,000 fine or even the loss of a member's patch. Safety during club gatherings is also taken seriously. One rule specifically prohibits throwing explosives or any similar items into a fire when other Mongols are nearby. Anyone who violates that rule faces immediate physical punishment, along with disciplinary action from the club's executive leadership. Membership also comes with financial and attendance obligations. Members must pay monthly dues to the chapter treasurer and are expected to attend weekly church meetings, where club business is discussed behind closed doors. Another important rule concerns drug use. While federal law enforcement has repeatedly linked the Mongols to narcotics trafficking investigations, the club's official constitution forbids members from personally using hard drugs such as heroin. According to club rules, any member who becomes addicted can face immediate expulsion and the loss of their colors. Above all else, the Constitution emphasizes loyalty to fellow members. One of its strongest principles is that a Mongol must stand beside a brother under any circumstance. Walking away from a fight while another member is outnumbered is considered one of the worst betrayals possible. The punishment for abandoning a fellow Mongol can include immediate physical discipline and permanent banishment from the club. This code of loyalty creates a powerful shield around the club. In the outlaw biker world, a problem with one member is often treated as a problem with the entire organization. Members are expected to stand together, protect one another, and keep club matters inside the club. That sense of collective defense is strengthened even further through a series of secret internal procedures designed to protect the organization when it comes under pressure. One of the most well-known of these procedures is something called Code 55. This is a strict emergency order that can be issued by the club's national leadership after a major incident, especially a murder or another high-profile event that could attract intense law enforcement attention. Once Code 55 is declared, members are instructed to immediately stop wearing their cuts and patches, hide any visible connection to the club, stop carrying weapons, and avoid all contact with law enforcement. The goal is simple: reduce visibility and make it harder for investigators to gather information. The Mongols are also known for fiercely protecting their symbols and identity. Club imagery is treated as something that must be earned, not copied. One example is the famous Genghis Khan profile tattoo, which is reserved exclusively for full patch members. If someone who was never properly initiated, or a former member who left on bad terms, is found wearing that tattoo, they are ordered to either remove it or permanently cover it. According to senior members, the individual is first asked, nicely, to get rid of it. But if they refuse, the consequences can be severe. The club has been accused of using physical force to remove the tattoo, including cutting or burning it off the person's skin. There are also special patches and tattoos within the club that carry significant meaning. One of the most talked about is the skull and crossbones patch. Law enforcement investigators have long alleged that this patch is awarded only to members who have committed a homicide on behalf of the club. Another highly respected marking is the RFFN tattoo, short for Respect Few, Fear None. Authorities claim this tattoo is reserved for members who have carried out documented acts of violence against the Hells Angels. Chapter 3. The Rocker War, the Battle for the Golden State. By the middle of the 1970s, the Mongols' MC was growing at a remarkable pace across Southern California. New chapters appeared throughout Los Angeles, the San Gabriel Valley, the San Fernando Valley, Long Beach, San Diego, and Bakersfield. What began as a local club was quickly becoming a serious force within the outlaw biker world. But that growth came with consequences. As the Mongols expanded into more territory, they found themselves on a collision course with the most powerful outlaw motorcycle club in California, the Hells Angels. The issue that sparked the conflict may seem small to outsiders, but inside biker culture it carried enormous significance. It centered around the bottom rocker on the Mongols' vests. The Hells Angels, who had been founded in California in 1948, viewed the state as their exclusive territory. They believed no other motorcycle club had the right to wear a California rocker on the back of its colors. To them, the patch represented authority over the state. The Mongols saw things very differently. Since their founding in 1969, they had proudly worn the California rocker as a symbol of their East Los Angeles roots and their identity as a California-born club. Giving it up was never considered an option. By 1977, tensions had reached a breaking point, and the disagreement exploded into open warfare. It was a clash between two very different organizations. The Hells Angels were larger, wealthier, and had hundreds of members spread across the country. On paper, the Mongols appeared badly outmatched, but numbers did not tell the whole story. Many of the Mongols' core members were Vietnam veterans with real combat experience. They had been trained in military tactics, understood small unit operations, and knew how to function under pressure. That background gave the club an advantage that could not be measured simply by membership numbers. The Mongols also had another strength. Their deep connections within the Hispanic neighborhoods of East Los Angeles allowed them to build relationships with other powerful groups that resented the Hells Angels' long-standing racial exclusivity. Several key individuals played important roles during this period. One of them was Ernest Rabbit Salas, an officer in the Mongols' San Gabriel chapter. His brother, Robert Robot Salas, held a high-ranking position within the Mexican Mafia, also known as La M. That family connection created a link between outlaw bikers operating on the streets and one of the most influential prison gang structures in California. As the club continued recruiting younger and more aggressive Hispanic members, often referred to as Mexican Mongols, its reputation for violence and street-level fighting ability grew rapidly. These recruits brought a level of experience and aggression that surprised many of their rivals, including the Hells Angels, who suddenly found themselves facing a very different kind of opponent than they had expected. This partnership created something far more significant than a simple alliance. It marked a major shift in how power operated within the outlaw world of Southern California. The traditional biker culture, built around motorcycles, brotherhood, and club loyalty, began merging with the deeply rooted street and prison gang networks that already controlled large parts of the region. By bringing in street gang members who were already connected to the Mexican Mafia through lifelong commitments and the code of blood in, blood out, the Mongols gained access to a pool of experienced and highly violent enforcers. These recruits were already familiar with conflict, loyalty, and survival in dangerous environments. But that advantage came with complications. Many of these men now found themselves balancing two separate worlds. On one side was their loyalty to the Mongols Motorcycle Club. On the other was their allegiance to prison gang structures that demanded obedience of their own. The result was a constant struggle to navigate competing loyalties, creating a complex and sometimes dangerous dynamic inside the organization. As tensions with the Hells Angels escalated, the conflict spread across California with brutal intensity. The war played out on highways, inside bars, outside clubhouses, and throughout suburban neighborhoods. Drive-by shootings became increasingly common. Clubhouses were targeted with bomb attacks. Violent confrontations erupted in bars and parking lots. What had started as a dispute over territory had evolved into a full-scale biker war. The Mongols were not fighting alone. They formed alliances with other motorcycle clubs that opposed the Hells Angels' efforts to dominate the outlaw biker world. Among the most important of these allies were the Outlaws Motorcycle Club and the Vagos Motorcycle Club, both of which shared an interest in resisting Hells Angels' influence. By the mid-1980s, years of violence had produced no clear winner. Both organizations had suffered losses, and the conflict had reached a bloody stalemate. Leaders on both sides began to recognize a harsh reality. If the fighting continued, it could eventually destroy both clubs while drawing overwhelming attention from federal law enforcement agencies. Faced with that possibility, representatives from both organizations negotiated a historic truce. The agreement fundamentally reshaped the outlaw biker landscape in California. Under the terms of the deal, the Hells Angels officially gave up control of Southern California to the Mongols. The Mongols, in turn, secured the exclusive and uncontested right to wear the California bottom rocker throughout the southern half of the state. At the same time, the Hells Angels retained their own exclusive claim to the California rocker in Northern California. The result was an invisible dividing line stretching across the Golden State, separating two rival biker empires and reducing the likelihood of another large-scale war. For the Mongols, the agreement represented a remarkable achievement. No other outlaw motorcycle club had managed to force the Hells Angels to surrender territory and formally acknowledge another club's authority on the West Coast. After years of conflict, the Mongols had secured something many considered impossible. No other outlaw motorcycle club had managed to force the Hells Angels to surrender territory and formally acknowledge another club's authority on the West Coast. After years of conflict, the Mongols had secured something many considered impossible. Chapter 4. Espionage on Two Wheels: The Infiltration of Billy St. John. Although the public war had ended, law enforcement agencies believed that criminal activity continued behind the scenes. Investigators alleged that members of the Mongol nation remained heavily involved in a variety of illegal enterprises, particularly the production and large-scale distribution of high-purity methamphetamine. As concerns grew, the club attracted the attention of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, better known as the ATF. In 1998, the agency launched what would become one of the boldest undercover operations ever conducted against an outlaw motorcycle club. The man chosen for the mission was William Queen. Queen was no ordinary federal agent. He was a veteran ATF investigator and a decorated military veteran who had served with the Army Special Forces during the Vietnam War, earning the Silver Star for his service. He was also a lifelong motorcycle enthusiast, giving him a unique advantage few agents possessed. His military background, mechanical knowledge, confidence around motorcycles, and ability to handle extreme pressure made him an ideal candidate for a deep undercover assignment inside the one-percenter world. Working under the supervision of ATF case agent John Ciccone, Queen adopted a completely new identity. He became Billy St. John. The character was carefully constructed to survive the intense scrutiny of seasoned outlaw bikers. Billy St. John was presented as a hard-drinking, Harley-riding outlaw with a rough appearance and a fabricated history filled with violence and drug trafficking. Every detail was designed to make him believable in a world where trust was rare and suspicion was constant. Queen eventually focused his efforts on the Mongols' San Fernando Valley chapter. Federal investigators considered this chapter one of the club's most active, influential, and violent units. If Billy St. John could earn the trust of its members, he would gain access to the inner workings of one of the most feared outlaw biker organizations in America. By 2002, the rivalry between the Mongols and the Hells Angels was no longer just about territory. A clear cultural and generational divide had developed between the two organizations. The Hells Angels had evolved into a club largely made up of older, established members. Many were middle-aged men who rode spotless Harley-Davidsons and worked hard to present a more polished public image. They wanted to be seen less as violent outlaws and more as a respected motorcycle club with deep roots and tradition. The Mongols represented something very different. Their membership was younger, predominantly Hispanic, and increasingly drawn from the streets of Los Angeles. According to critics within the biker world, some recruits had little interest in motorcycles themselves. In some cases, members were brought in directly from street gang environments because of their willingness to fight and their reputation for toughness. As tensions continued to build during the Laughlin River Run, both sides began testing each other long before any punches were thrown. On the night of April 26th, the psychological games began. A group of Mongols walked into the casino floor of the Flamingo Hilton, where many Hells Angels were gathered. They didn't start a fight. They didn't exchange words. Instead, they simply stood there and stared. The tactic, often referred to as eye-fucking within biker culture, was intended to provoke a reaction. It was a direct challenge without ever becoming a physical confrontation. The scene was witnessed by ATF agent John Ciccone, who later observed that the Hells Angels appeared determined not to take the bait. Maintaining their public image had become increasingly important, and according to Ciccone, members were essentially forced to bite their tongues and absorb the disrespect. The tension didn't end there. Later that same evening, another group of Mongols gathered around a Hells Angels motorcycle that was on display inside the Golden Nugget Casino. By surrounding the bike, they blocked it from public view and effectively turned it into another act of intimidation. Neither side was willing to back down. As the night turned into the early morning hours of April 27th, the confrontation shifted to Harrah's Casino, where the Mongols had established their headquarters during the rally. A large group of Hells Angels arrived at the property to confront them. According to reports, the dispute centered on accusations that Mongols members had been harassing vendors who were selling Hells Angels merchandise. What happened next unfolded in an environment that was astonishingly unprepared for violence. Because of budget cuts, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department had assigned only 2 officers to monitor the entire River Run event. Inside Harrah's, there was virtually nothing in place to stop a major confrontation if one broke out. Then came the spark. Near the entrance to the casino bar, a Mongol deliberately bumped shoulders with a Hells Angel. For those watching, it was immediately obvious where things were headed. A blackjack dealer named Jay Burr recognized the danger almost instantly. He picked up the phone and contacted security with a warning that would later become infamous. "We don't have enough security for what's going to happen." A short time later, his prediction became reality. At approximately 2:15 in the morning, Harrah's casino floor exploded into chaos. Surveillance cameras captured a scene that looked more like a battlefield than a casino. Between 60 and 70 bikers surged into hand-to-hand combat. Weapons appeared almost immediately. Guns, knives, heavy wrenches, hammers, and motorcycle chains were used as the fighting spread across the gaming floor. Men dove behind blackjack tables and slot machines for cover. while terrified tourists and gamblers ran for safety. The violence lasted only a short period of time, but the damage was devastating. Several people were killed, many others were injured, and the incident triggered one of the most complicated legal battles ever associated with outlaw motorcycle clubs. The Laughlin River Run riot became a turning point in biker history. It marked the first time multiple murders had occurred inside a major Nevada casino. The aftermath brought an avalanche of investigations, prosecutions, and courtroom battles involving both state and federal authorities. More importantly, it destroyed any remaining illusion that the Mongols and Hell's Angels could peacefully coexist. The truce that had held together for years was effectively dead. Chapter 6. The Corporate Cartel, Ruben Doc Cavazos and the Cholo Transformation. Out of the chaos that followed, Laughlin emerged one of the most influential and controversial leaders the Mongols would ever produce. His name was Ruben Doc Cavazos. Born on December 28, 1956, in Los Angeles, Cavazos was raised primarily by his father in the tough Highland Park neighborhood. As a young man, he became involved with the Avenues, a notoriously violent Mexican-American street gang. His early life included time spent in county jail, a path that seemed unlikely to lead anywhere beyond the streets. But Cavazos eventually took a different direction. He earned a professional license as a CAT scan radiology technician, a rare accomplishment within the outlaw biker world. That medical background earned him the nickname Doc, a name that stayed with him throughout his life inside the club. When Cavazos eventually joined the Mongols and rose through the ranks to become international president, he inherited an organization facing serious challenges. Years of conflict had taken their toll. The ongoing struggle with the Hell's Angels had drained manpower and placed constant pressure on the club's ability to grow. Cavazos believed the Mongols needed to adapt if they wanted to survive. His solution was straightforward. The club needed more soldiers. In his view, survival mattered more than preserving traditional biker ideals. If a recruit was willing to fight, show loyalty, and strengthen the organization, Cavazos believed the Mongols should bring him in, whether or not he fit the classic image of an outlaw motorcyclist. That philosophy would dramatically reshape the future of the Mongol nation. Under Ruben Doc Cavazos, the Mongols went through one of the biggest changes in their history. Rather than relying solely on traditional biker recruits, Cavazos pushed the club in a completely different direction. He actively sought out members from some of Southern California's most violent street gangs, particularly the Avenues and the 18th Street Gang. The decision immediately created tension inside the organization. Many of the club's longtime members were furious. These were men who had spent years proving themselves, riding thousands of miles, and earning their patches through loyalty and commitment to biker culture. To them, the new recruits represented everything the Mongols were never supposed to become. A large number of these younger street gang members, often referred to as cholos, had little connection to motorcycles. Some didn't own bikes. Others barely knew how to ride. Critics within the club believed many of them viewed the Mongols not as a motorcycle brotherhood, but simply as another extension of existing street gang territory. Despite the criticism, Cavazos' strategy achieved exactly what he wanted. Membership numbers grew rapidly. To strengthen his control, Cavazos also created a specialized enforcement unit known as the East LA Enforcers. Members of this group wore distinctive black and white patches on the front of their cuts, making them instantly recognizable within the club. Their primary role was to serve as Cavazos' personal security force and as a powerful enforcement arm, capable of intimidating rivals and internal opponents alike. But expanding the club required money. Lots of it. To support that growth, Cavazos allegedly developed deeper connections with the Mexican mafia and organizations operating within the larger narcotics trade. According to federal investigators, the Mongols began purchasing wholesale quantities of high-purity methamphetamine from trafficking organizations, including the Tijuana cartel. The drugs were then allegedly distributed through networks connected to Sureño street gangs. In return, authorities claimed that Cavazos agreed to pay taxes to La M, the Mexican mafia, on drug sales taking place in territories under the prison gang's influence. For a time, the strategy appeared successful. The club was larger than ever, but internally serious cracks were beginning to form. Cavazos's leadership style became increasingly controversial. Many members viewed him as overly controlling, while others questioned the direction he was taking the organization. As the years passed, distrust continued to grow. By 2008, many members had become deeply suspicious of their own president. Accusations began circulating that Cavazos had misappropriated large amounts of club money. Even more damaging were claims that he had triggered a dangerous and unauthorized conflict with the Mexican mafia over disputes involving drug tax payments and territory. For many members, that crossed a line. The backlash reached its peak on August 30th, 2008. During a tense closed-door national meeting in Vernon, California, longtime members finally moved against him. In what amounted to an internal coup, the old-school faction successfully voted Ruben "Doc" Cavazos out of the Mongols motorcycle club. But by that point, events were already unfolding beyond the club's control. For 3 years, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives had been conducting a massive undercover investigation known as Operation Black Rain. The operation was one of the most ambitious infiltrations ever carried out against an outlaw motorcycle club. 4 male undercover agents had managed to work their way into the organization and earn full patch status. At the same time, 4 female undercover agents posed as their girlfriends, helping reinforce and verify their fabricated biker identities. Federal authorities had spent years quietly gathering evidence. Then, on October 21st, 2008, the investigation moved into its final phase. More than 1,000 federal agents and local law enforcement officers launched coordinated raids across Southern California, Nevada, Oregon, Colorado, Washington, and Ohio. The operation struck multiple locations at the same time. When it was over, 61 Mongols members had been arrested. Among those taken into custody was Cavazos himself, who was arrested at his home in West Covina. He shared the residence with his son, Ruben "Lil Rubes" Cavazos Jr., and his brother, Al "the Suit" Cavazos. The federal case against him was overwhelming. Prosecutors used the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, better known as RICO, to accuse the enterprise of involvement in murder, torture, and large-scale drug trafficking. Faced with the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars, Cavazos quickly changed course. In January 2009, he entered a guilty plea to racketeering conspiracy. His sentencing would later take place under highly unusual circumstances. On September 8, 2011, U.S. District Judge Otis Wright presided over a closed-door hearing unlike almost anything seen in a major federal criminal case. The court sealed all sentencing documents, a rare step reportedly taken to protect Cavazos from potential retaliation because of his cooperation and guilty plea. When the proceedings concluded, Ruben "Doc" Cavazos was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. For the man who had transformed the Mongols more dramatically than perhaps any leader before him, the rise had been extraordinary. But the fall was just as dramatic. Chapter 7. The Battle for the Brand, the Constitutional Fight for the Patch. After federal authorities arrested many of the Mongols' top leaders, the United States Department of Justice launched a legal strategy unlike anything seen before in American history. The government wasn't just trying to prosecute individual members. It was trying to take ownership of the Mongols' identity itself. Federal prosecutors set their sights on the club's most recognizable symbol, the Mongols' name, and the famous patch featuring the cartoon image of Genghis Khan. Under the direction of Assistant U.S. Attorney Steve Welk, prosecutors argued that the patch was far more than a logo. According to the government's theory, the image functioned as both a physical and psychological form of armor that helped strengthen the club's influence and reputation. Their argument was ambitious. If the government could use criminal forfeiture laws to seize the trademark rights to the Mongols' name and logo, it could then legally prevent members from displaying those symbols in public. In practical terms, that would mean law enforcement officers could order members to remove patches, jackets, and vests displaying the Mongols' insignia. The strategy was designed to strike at the very heart of the organization. Rather than dismantling the club member by member, federal authorities hoped to eliminate the symbol that united them. Critics described the effort as a legal death sentence aimed at the organization itself. The proposal immediately triggered a constitutional battle that would last for more than a decade. The fight soon attracted national attention. The American Civil Liberties Union, specifically the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial counties, stepped into the case on behalf of club members who had not been charged with crimes. Among them was Ramon Rivera, who argued that wearing the Mongols patch was a form of personal expression that reflected both his association with the club and his cultural identity. The defense focused heavily on a unique aspect of trademark law. According to their argument, the Mongols patch was not a traditional commercial trademark used to sell products. Instead, it functioned as what is known legally as a collective membership mark, a symbol used to identify membership within an organization. That distinction was critical. Defense attorneys warned that if the government succeeded in taking control of the mark, it could create a dangerous precedent. Future governments might attempt to seize and prohibit the symbols of political groups, religious organizations, social movements, or any other association they viewed unfavorably. The case eventually landed before U.S. District Judge David O. Carter in Santa Ana, California. At first, it appeared the government had won. In December 2018, a federal jury found the Mongol Nation organization liable as an unincorporated association under RICO and ordered that the trademark be forfeited. For the Department of Justice, it looked like a historic victory. But only a few months later, everything changed. In February 2019, Judge Carter issued a detailed 51-page ruling that reversed the forfeiture order and delivered a major setback to the government's case. His decision rested largely on constitutional grounds. First, Judge Carter concluded that taking the trademark would violate protections guaranteed under the First Amendment. According to the ruling, displaying the Mongols patch directly communicates a person's association with the club. Allowing the government to seize that symbol would effectively restrict protected expression before it even occurred, creating what the court described as a chilling effect on speech throughout the country. Judge Carter also found problems under the Eighth Amendment. The court determined that stripping the organization of a symbol it had used continuously since 1969 amounted to an excessive punishment. The forfeiture was described as harsh and grossly disproportionate when compared to the specific crimes committed by individual members. For the Mongols, the ruling represented a significant legal victory, but the fight was not over. Federal prosecutors refused to back down and appealed the decision to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The case continued for several more years before reaching its final stage. Then, in January 2023, the appellate court issued a unanimous decision written by U.S. Circuit Judge Holly Thomas. The ruling affirmed Judge Carter's decision and delivered another defeat to the government. The court concluded that criminal forfeiture laws under RICO allow the government to seize and possess property but they do not give authorities the power to eliminate trademark rights or prevent others from legally using those trademarks in the future. In other words, even if the government could take possession of certain property, it could not erase the existence of the Mongols' identity itself. The decision marked the end of one of the most unusual legal battles ever fought between an outlaw motorcycle club and the federal government. Across the biker world, the outcome was celebrated as a landmark victory. The Mongols had gone head-to-head with the full legal power of the United States Department of Justice and emerged victorious. More importantly, the case established a significant constitutional precedent protecting symbolic expression and freedom of association, protections that extended far beyond the Mongols and affected motorcycle clubs across the country. For an organization that had survived wars, federal investigations, undercover infiltrations, and internal power struggles, the fight for the patch became one of its most important victories, not on the streets, but in a courtroom. Chapter 8: The Modern Era of Paranoia, David Santillan and the ATF Ghost. As the Mongols entered the 2000s, the club found itself facing a new challenge. After years of federal investigations, racketeering cases, undercover operations, and damaging headlines, the organization was trying to reshape its public image. Under National President David Santillan, the Mongols publicly pushed back against claims that they operated as a criminal enterprise. Santillan insisted that the club had changed. According to him, internal rules had been revised to keep active drug users and career criminals out of the organization. The message was clear. The Mongols wanted to present themselves as a legitimate motorcycle club rather than the outlaw empire described by federal prosecutors. For a time, that effort appeared to be working. Then, everything changed. In late 2021, a deeply personal dispute exploded into public view and triggered one of the most damaging controversies the club had faced in years. The scandal began with a secretly recorded video involving David Santillan himself. The footage had been recorded by his wife, Annie Santillan, in June 2021 during a period of severe marital tension. In the video, Santillan appeared visibly intoxicated, emotional, and distraught. What made the recording so explosive was not his condition. It was what he was saying. During the conversation, Santillan spoke about retired ATF agent John Ciccone. This was no ordinary federal agent. Ciccone had spent years investigating the Mongols and was one of the key figures behind Operation Black Rain, the massive federal operation that led to dozens of arrests inside the club. In the recording, a tearful Santillan could be heard saying, "John told me that I have 1 year. 1 year. He's retiring. After 1 year, he's done, and he can't protect me, so we have to have an exit strategy." For members of the Mongols, those words sounded alarming. The situation became even worse when Annie Santillan distributed the video to high-ranking members of the club. She didn't stop there. Along with the footage, she sent a text message that directly questioned her husband's loyalty. The message read, "You guys need to see this video. David has been working with the government his entire time. Why he felt so comfortable to do what he does, he is simply a CI. In other words, he is a rat." Inside the Mongol nation, the reaction was immediate and brutal. Club leaders quickly called a closed-door meeting to address the allegations. The consequences for Santillan were swift. He was removed from his position as national president, expelled from the club, and accused of betraying the very organization he had once led. Some members even demanded a federal investigation into whether previous racketeering cases involving the Mongols had been compromised by the actions of their own president. Whether the allegations were true or not, the damage was already done. The Santillan controversy exposed a reality that many outlaw motorcycle clubs struggle to confront. No matter how strict their rules may be, no matter how secretive their operations become, and no matter how much effort they invest in counter-surveillance, some of the greatest threats often come from places they cannot control. A marital dispute, a private conversation, a smartphone recording, or the complicated relationships that sometimes develop between longtime targets and the federal agents who spend years pursuing them. In the modern era, those vulnerabilities can be just as dangerous as any rival motorcycle club. Conclusion: the sovereign horizon of the Mongol nation. The story of the Mongols Motorcycle Club is ultimately a story of survival. What began in 1969 as a small organization formed by 10 Hispanic Vietnam veterans in East Los Angeles grew into one of the most recognizable and influential one-percenter motorcycle clubs in the world. Over more than 5 decades, the club has faced relentless pressure from nearly every direction imaginable. Federal investigations, long-term undercover infiltrations, internal power struggles, deadly territorial conflicts, and repeated attempts by authorities to dismantle the organization altogether. Yet despite those challenges, the Mongols endured. Looking back across that history, 3 major forces help explain why. The first is the influence of military experience and veteran culture. From the very beginning, the club benefited from the presence of Vietnam combat veterans whose experiences shaped the organization's identity. Their discipline, survival instincts, tactical thinking, and willingness to endure hardship helped the Mongols survive challenges that might have destroyed a less organized group. Those early veterans helped create a structure capable of resisting pressure from both rival clubs and law enforcement agencies. The second factor is the conflict between traditional biker culture and street gang influence. Few leaders represent that struggle more clearly than Ruben Doc Cavazos. His recruitment strategy dramatically increased the club's numbers and strengthened its position during ongoing conflicts. But it also introduced a cultural divide that challenged the values many longtime members believed the Mongols were founded upon. While this strategy helped the club grow, it also created internal tensions that eventually contributed to Cavazos' downfall and nearly pushed the organization into crisis. The third factor is perhaps the most unexpected. It involves the law itself. The legal battle over the Mongols' patch became one of the most important constitutional fights in the club's history. The rulings issued by Judge David O. Carter and later upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals helped redefine the limits of government power when it comes to symbolic association and expression. Ironically, an organization that built its identity around resisting authority ultimately relied on constitutional protections provided by that very system to preserve its own identity. That legal victory ensured that the club's symbols would survive even when many believed they were facing extinction. Today, the Mongol nation continues to exist. Its black and white colors are protected not only by the loyalty of its members, but also by legal precedents established in federal courtrooms. The challenges have not disappeared. Federal investigations continue. Internal conflicts still emerge, and each new generation brings its own changes and uncertainties. Yet the organization, founded by 10 veterans in Montebello, has endured through wars, prosecutions, betrayals, and decades of pressure. More than half a century after its creation, the Mongols remain one of the most recognized and fiercely independent names in the outlaw biker world. And whether viewed as a brotherhood, a subculture, or an outlaw empire, their story remains one of the most remarkable chapters in the history of American motorcycle clubs. A smiling medieval jester. That's the last symbol you'd expect to represent one of Australia's most feared outlaw biker gangs. But for more than 55 years, the Finks Motorcycle Club has built a reputation far darker than its mascot suggests. Founded in 1969, The club survived deadly biker wars, nationwide police crackdowns, and some of Australia's toughest anti-gang laws. It became linked to notorious public shootouts, violent turf wars, and a controversial 2013 patchover that transformed nearly 90% of its members into the Mongols motorcycle club almost overnight. Investigators now allege the organization has expanded beyond street crime into corporate networks connected to multi-billion-dollar government-funded security contracts. So, how did a small Sydney motorcycle club become one of Australia's most resilient outlaw empires? This is the story of the Finks Motorcycle Club, the Port Gawler duel, and the rise of Adelaide's biker scene. Although the Finks were founded in New South Wales, much of the club's character was shaped after it expanded into Adelaide, South Australia, during the early 1970s. At the time, Adelaide was quickly becoming known as Australia's bikie capital. The city developed a motorcycle culture unlike anywhere else in the country, and many of the trends that emerged there would later spread across Australia's outlaw biker scene. The local biker movement was heavily influenced by Britain's mods and rockers culture, as well as the wider wave of youth rebellion that swept through many Western countries during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Back then, Adelaide's motorcycle groups were very different from the organized outlaw clubs that would appear later. They weren't sophisticated criminal organizations. They were small, close-knit groups of young men, many from working-class families or immigrant communities, who shared a passion for cruiser motorcycles, loved partying, and had little respect for ordinary motorists. To them, everyday drivers weren't fellow road users. They were simply tin tops or cages, nicknames that reflected the growing divide between bikers and the rest of society. Early Adelaide motorcycle clubs, including the Elizabeth Motorcycle Club, named after the suburb where many of its members lived, and the Salisbury-based Filthy Few, whose membership was made up largely of Dutch, Swiss, and Belgian immigrants, stayed well below the attention of police and politicians. At that stage, they weren't viewed as major criminal organizations. Most of their illegal activity revolved around the counterculture of the time, with marijuana and LSD being the drugs most commonly associated with the scene. But that period didn't last for long. Between 1970 and 1972, Adelaide's biker culture changed dramatically. The relaxed social clubs of the past began adopting the same military-style organization and one-percenter identity that had already become famous among American outlaw motorcycle clubs. The atmosphere became tougher, more disciplined, and increasingly violent. The first major turning point came at the remote beaches of Port Gawler during the late 1970s. Long-standing tensions over members switching from one club to another finally exploded into a carefully organized confrontation involving several biker clubs. What began as a violent clash quickly made history when it resulted in the first recorded shooting linked to Adelaide's biker scene. Compared to the bloody conflicts that would follow in later decades, the Port Gawler incident may seem relatively minor, but at the time, it marked a defining moment. It was the point where South Australia's motorcycle clubs stopped being seen as rebellious social groups and started becoming highly territorial organizations willing to defend their influence through violence. By the 1980s, Adelaide's original local clubs were rapidly disappearing or merging into larger organizations. The biggest reason was the arrival of powerful interstate and international outlaw motorcycle clubs that completely reshaped the criminal landscape of South Australia. Several major consolidations during this period changed the balance of power and redefined organized crime across the state. As these nationally connected one-percenter clubs expanded their influence, local rivalries became far more dangerous. Small neighborhood disputes evolved into conflicts involving organizations with members across multiple states and access to much larger criminal networks. Law enforcement had to change with them. The relatively hands-off policing of the 1970s gave way to intelligence-driven task forces that focused specifically on outlaw motorcycle gangs. Authorities recognized that these clubs were no longer isolated biker groups. They had become deeply involved in cross-border criminal operations. particularly the trafficking of methamphetamine and illegal firearms. The Gold Coast Powder Keg, from the Royal Pines to Aura restaurant. For decades, the Finks operated within Australia's violent outlaw biker world, without attracting sustained national attention. That changed forever on March 18, 2006. On that night, the ballroom inside the Royal Pines Resort on Queensland's Gold Coast was packed with around 1,800 people attending a major kickboxing tournament. It was a glamorous event filled with business figures, celebrities, sports fans, and VIP guests. But beneath the bright lights and formal atmosphere, members of Australia's criminal underworld were sitting only a few meters apart. The Finks and the Hells Angels had been locked in a bitter rivalry for years. Control of the Gold Coast's profitable drug trade and nightclub security industry had fueled ongoing territorial disputes, and tensions between the two clubs had continued to build. That evening, a large group of Hells Angels members and associates occupied ringside seats. Among them was Christopher Wayne Hudson, one of the club's most recognizable and unpredictable figures. Hudson openly displayed his gang affiliation and had built a reputation for aggressive, drug-fueled behavior that made him feared even within outlaw biker circles. Then the Finks arrived. Around 50 members entered the resort together, led by senior figures Shane Bowden and Nicholas "The Knife" Forbes. Dressed in full club colors, they walked directly into the crowded ballroom before positioning themselves around the Hells Angels table. Everyone could sense something was about to happen. The violence began the moment Nicholas "The Knife" Forbes threw a powerful punch at Christopher Hudson. Within seconds, the ballroom erupted into complete chaos. The confrontation, later remembered as the Ballroom Blitz, turned into one of the most infamous biker gang battles in Australian history. The fight spread across tables, chairs, and VIP sections, as members of both clubs armed themselves with firearms, knives, and whatever objects they could grab. Gunfire echoed through the packed venue, while terrified spectators abandoned their seats and rushed toward the emergency exits in panic. When the violence finally ended and the surviving bikers escaped, the ballroom had become a crime scene. 3 people had been shot. 2 others had suffered stab wounds. Christopher Hudson, the main target of the Finks attack, survived the ambush, but he was left with serious facial injuries along with multiple gunshot wounds. After the Royal Pines riot, Nicholas "Nick the Knife" Forbes was arrested and charged with entering a premises with the intent to cause an affray, along with willful damage. But the controversy didn't end there. In a decision that sparked widespread criticism from both the public and politicians, Forbes was granted bail. However, his freedom lasted only a short time. While still on bail, he was arrested again after allegedly eye-gouging a security guard at Fisherman's Wharf. The incident reinforced the growing belief that the Finks had little respect for bail conditions or the authority of the courts. For many Australians, it became another example of just how difficult it was for the justice system to keep violent outlaw bikers under control. The Ballroom Blitz became far more than a violent gang fight. It marked a turning point in Australia's battle against outlaw motorcycle clubs. For years, biker violence had largely stayed out of public view, taking place in isolated locations far from ordinary people. The events at Royal Pines shattered that unwritten rule. A luxury tourist resort had become the scene of a gun battle involving heavily armed outlaw bikers, forcing politicians and police to respond with a wave of new anti-gang legislation that would continue for years. The consequences of that night reached even further. Although Christopher Hudson survived the attack, his ordeal was far from over. According to investigators, members of his own club, the Hells Angels, held him responsible for bringing unwanted police attention and embarrassment to the organization. As punishment, Hudson was reportedly subjected to a brutal physical assault by his fellow members. Already known for his unpredictable behavior, Hudson's mental condition deteriorated even further as he struggled with the trauma of the attack and his growing dependence on drugs. Then came another tragedy. On the morning of June 18, 2007, just over a year after the Royal Pines brawl, Hudson became involved in an argument with his girlfriend, Keira Douglas, and another woman at the corner of Flinders Lane and William Street, in the middle of Melbourne's central business district. As the confrontation unfolded, local solicitor Brendan Keelar and another passerby, Paul DeWard, stepped in, hoping to protect the women and calm the situation. Instead, they found themselves facing an armed man. Hudson pulled out a .40 S&W Llama Minimax pistol and opened fire. Brendan Keeler was shot in the head and died at the scene. Paul DeWard and Keira Douglas were both seriously wounded but survived. Hudson escaped immediately after the shooting, triggering a massive interstate manhunt that lasted 2 days before he finally surrendered to police in Wallan, Victoria. He was later sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 35 years. Meanwhile, violence on the Gold Coast continued to escalate. Over the following decade, a series of public shootings and gang confrontations kept the region under constant pressure, eventually leading to 2 major shootouts that attracted nationwide attention. One of the most notorious became known as the Battle of Broadbeach, which erupted inside Aura Restaurant. The confrontation began when members of the Bandidos arrived to confront Truchet, who was dining with Finks associate Matthew Jason Sword. Restaurant staff refused to serve the Bandidos, but the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Tables were overturned as customers scrambled toward emergency exits in panic, while the fight spread through the restaurant. Amid the chaos, waitress Sarah Louise Page showed remarkable courage. She rushed to collect knives and forks from the tables before they could be used as weapons, then hid behind a door as the violence spilled out onto the street. When police arrived, they were met with open hostility. Constable Annalise Young, the first officer at the scene, was confronted by an aggressive bandido who shouted, "Taser me you." That public display of defiance, taking place in one of Queensland's busiest tourist destinations, became another major catalyst for change. The incident pushed the Queensland government toward introducing some of the toughest anti-bikie laws the state had ever seen. The Western Front, Troy Mercanti, and the Coffin Cheaters War. In 2008, the Finks set their sights on Western Australia, making one of the boldest expansion moves in the club's history. Their arrival challenged the long-established balance of power in Perth's outlaw biker scene. At the center of that expansion was Troy Mercanti, one of Western Australia's most feared and influential outlaw bikers. For years, Mercanti had been a senior figure within the dominant Coffin Cheaters motorcycle club. But after a violent internal dispute, everything changed. He was expelled from the club on bad standing and, according to reports, was severely beaten by his former brothers before being cast out. Looking for both protection and an opportunity for revenge, Mercanti turned to one of his closest allies, South Australian Finks member Frank Kondo. Together, the 2 men established the Perth chapter of the Finks in 2008. Experienced Finks members from Australia's eastern states were brought in to strengthen the new chapter, helping build a heavily fortified clubhouse that would serve as the club's base as it pushed into Western Australia. The Coffin Cheaters saw the arrival of a Finks chapter in Perth as more than simple expansion. To them, it was a direct challenge on their own territory, and effectively a declaration of war. The conflict escalated quickly. In October 2008, Troy Mercanti and 3 fellow Finks members were riding along the Great Eastern Highway near Wooroloo when they came under fire. A hidden gunman armed with a high-powered rifle opened fire on the group. Mercanti narrowly escaped the attack, but Finks member Stephen John Wallace was struck in the shoulder. It was a clear sign that the rivalry had entered a far more dangerous phase. The violence reached another peak during a major drag racing event at the Kwinana Motorplex. In front of a large public crowd, members of the Finks and the Coffin Cheaters erupted into a brutal fight that quickly spiraled out of control. The injuries were severe. During the melee, Stephen Wallace had 3 fingers completely severed by a knife, while Finks member David Maripodi was shot in the leg. The legal consequences followed soon after. 5 Finks members, Clovis Chikonga, Troy Smith, Stephen Lawrence Silvestro, Tristan Roger Albury, and Stephen Wallace, were each sentenced to 2 years in prison for their involvement in the violence. Their defense teams argued that several of the men suffered from serious psychiatric conditions, including bipolar disorder, ADHD, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Despite those arguments, the court imposed prison sentences. While the violence played out in public, authorities were also working to dismantle the club in another way, by targeting its finances. In November 2010, Troy Mercanti's then-partner, Tammy Kingdon, was convicted by a district court jury on 4 counts of stealing and 1 count of property laundering. Investigators uncovered a scheme involving money taken from a trust fund that had been established for the young daughters of Marc Chabrier, a Coffin Cheaters member who had been killed during the 1998 bikie war with the Club de Rose. According to the investigation, those stolen funds were used by Kingdon to purchase the Finks Perth clubhouse. Using proceeds of crime legislation, authorities froze the property. The loss of the clubhouse dealt a major financial and operational blow to the Perth chapter, and the pressure only increased when Mercanti was later jailed for domestic violence offenses in 2013. The 2013 strategic mutation, the Great Mongols Patchover. By 2013, the Finks were facing a threat unlike anything they had encountered before. Instead of rival biker clubs, the greatest danger now came from state governments determined to dismantle outlaw motorcycle gangs through new legislation. In South Australia, Premier Mike Rann and Attorney General Michael Atkinson led an aggressive campaign aimed directly at the Finks, publicly identifying the club as the state's primary organized crime threat. Queensland soon followed. After winning office, Premier Campbell Newman and the Liberal National Party introduced the Vicious Lawless Association Disestablishment (VLAD) Act in late 2013. The legislation dramatically increased pressure on outlaw motorcycle clubs. Members could no longer openly wear club colors in public. Gatherings of 3 or more members were heavily restricted, and anyone committing crimes while linked to a declared criminal organization faced additional mandatory prison penalties. The Finks understood exactly what this meant. Their greatest weakness was no longer their rivals. It was their own name. So the club responded with one of the most remarkable strategic moves ever seen in Australia's outlaw biker world. In October 2013, the Finks negotiated a nationwide agreement to patch over to the United States-based Mongols Motorcycle Club. This wasn't a surrender. It was a carefully planned transformation. Under the agreement, as many as 90% of the club's members across Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland removed their familiar bung patches and replaced them with the black and white Genghis Khan insignia of the Mongols. The move completely changed the legal landscape. Australia's anti-gang laws had been drafted specifically to target the Finks Motorcycle Club. But almost overnight, thousands of pages of legal work became far less effective because many of those members no longer officially belonged to the Finks. They now wore Mongols' colors. That forced police and prosecutors to begin the lengthy legal process all over again if they wanted the Mongols declared a criminal organization under the same laws. The patchover instantly reshaped Australia's outlaw biker landscape. The Mongols emerged as one of the country's largest and most heavily organized motorcycle clubs, with more than 400 patched members. Just as importantly, they inherited the Finks' existing territories, long-established relationships, and distribution networks, giving the organization a powerful presence across multiple Australian states, almost overnight. The Pimpama execution, the assassination of Shane Bowden. Although the Finks' 2013 patchover to the Mongols helped the club sidestep growing legal pressure, it also created problems from within. Not everyone was willing to let go of the Finks' identity. Many longtime members resented abandoning the club they had spent years building, while others struggled to fit into the Mongols' far more structured international organization. Those internal tensions continued to grow, and no one represented that conflict more than Shane Bowden. Bowden had already earned a reputation as one of the central figures in the 2006 Ballroom Blitz. After the nationwide patchover in 2013, He joined the Mongols along with many other former Finks members. But his time there eventually came to an end, following a violent internal altercation in which he severely assaulted another Mongols member. Bowden was expelled from the club on bad standing. Rather than disappear from the outlaw biker world, he chose another path. In 2020, Bowden returned to the Finks and immediately began recruiting new members in an effort to rebuild the club's presence across southeast Queensland. That move was seen by the Mongols as a direct challenge to their control of the region. Before long, another bitter turf war was underway. In July 2020, Bowden narrowly survived a targeted drive-by shooting in Melbourne after being struck by a bullet in the leg. The attack left him badly injured and increasingly fearful for his safety. Despite strict COVID-19 border restrictions at the time, Bowden returned to the Gold Coast, believing he would be safer surrounded by trusted Finks associates. He was wrong. Just after midnight on October 12, 2020, the 47-year-old arrived home after a gym session at his unit complex on Cox Road in Pimpama, on the northern Gold Coast. He drove his black BMW into the garage. Before he could even step out of the vehicle, two hooded gunmen emerged from the darkness. One carried a fully automatic pistol. The other was armed with a shotgun. They opened fire at point-blank range. The attack was swift, deliberate, and overwhelming. Bowden was hit 21 times in what investigators later described as a calculated execution. As detectives pieced together the evidence, the planning behind the assassination became increasingly clear. Forensic specialists discovered that the attackers had secretly attached a GPS tracking device to Bowden's BMW, allowing them to monitor his movements in real time. Investigators also found that those involved had relied on encrypted mobile phones, making it far more difficult for police to intercept their communications. The operation showed a level of planning that resembled a military-style hit, rather than a spontaneous gang attack. Bowden's killing immediately pushed tensions across southeast Queensland to dangerous levels. Police later recovered internal gang documents indicating that both Finks and Mongols chapters operating between Logan and the New South Wales border had been placed under strict attack-on-site orders. Violence quickly spread throughout the region. On June 5, 2021, a barber shop in Windaroo was destroyed in an arson attack. Just 2 days later, a large public fight involving rival bikers broke out inside Australia Fair shopping centre in Southport, alarming shoppers and drawing a major police response. Authorities were eventually able to calm the situation after specialist investigators arrested a senior national office bearer from the Mongols who was allegedly connected to the Southport brawl. The legal fallout continued for years. By January 2026, after nearly 5 years of investigation and court proceedings, the Brisbane Magistrates Court committed 8 men to stand trial in the Supreme Court of Brisbane over Shane Bowden's murder. The accused faced significant legal pressure as prosecutors prepared one of Australia's most closely watched outlaw biker murder cases, the billion-dollar offshore conduit, Ali Bilal and Nauru. In recent years, the modern Finks have demonstrated an ability to move far beyond traditional street-level crime. Investigators allege that the organization has increasingly operated through sophisticated corporate structures, allowing it to expand into legitimate business sectors while maintaining links to the outlaw biker world. One of the most controversial examples emerged in late 2025. The allegations exposed what investigators described as a direct connection between the global leadership of the Finks and Australia's taxpayer-funded offshore refugee processing system on the Pacific island of Nauru. At the center of the controversy was Ali Bilal. The 53-year-old is widely recognized as the global leader of the Finks Motorcycle Club and has long been a familiar figure within Australia's outlaw biker scene. His background has attracted public attention for years. In 2002, Bilal legally changed his name to Tony Soprano before changing it back a decade later in 2012. Alongside that unusual chapter were multiple criminal investigations and firearms prohibition orders. Despite that history, Bilal established several Canberra-registered labor hire and security companies, including Safe Hands Group Patuai Limited and Black Dog Group Services. Then, in August and November 2025, a series of whistleblower allegations brought those businesses under intense public scrutiny. Former Australian Army rifleman Ocean Donohoe, a highly decorated veteran, revealed that he had been recruited by Safe Hands Group for a sensitive fly-in, fly-out rapid response security role on Nauru. According to Donohoe, he later discovered that the operation was owned and controlled by Ali Bilal and staffed by patched members of the Finks motorcycle club. Those contractors were reportedly responsible for providing security, community patrols, and escort services for the Nzik cohort, a group of stateless people and asylum seekers who had been released from indefinite Australian immigration detention after a landmark High Court ruling in late 2023. The operation was funded with Australian public money. In late 2024, the Australian government signed a 30-year agreement worth approximately $2.5 billion with Nauruan President David Adiang to support the resettlement of asylum seekers on the island. As part of that agreement, an immediate $40 million was allocated for security and policing. Nauru Community Safety, the government body responsible for overseeing security at the Regional Processing Center, subcontracted those operations to Bilal's Safe Hands Group and Black Dog Group Services. The arrangement sparked intense political debate, raising serious questions about how companies allegedly linked to one of Australia's most notorious outlaw motorcycle clubs secured contracts connected to a taxpayer-funded offshore security program. Donohoe's allegations were soon backed by another insider. Dr. Derek Elias, a senior Home Affairs official, chose to speak out despite the risk of facing a lengthy prison sentence. According to Dr. Elias, corruption inside Nauru's detention system had become deeply embedded. He described what he called a conveyor belt of corruption, claiming that millions of dollars in Australian taxpayer funding had been funneled into private companies connected to outlaw motorcycle gangs and politically connected figures on the island. The allegations exposed what many viewed as a major contradiction in Australia's national security policy. Inside Australia, the government strictly applies the Section 501 character test under the Migration Act, allowing authorities to cancel visas and deport non-citizens for criminal conduct, or even associations with outlaw motorcycle clubs. Yet, according to the allegations surrounding the Nauru contracts, taxpayer-funded security work was being carried out by companies linked to Ali Bilal, the global leader of the Finks motorcycle club. Those same contractors were responsible for overseeing vulnerable asylum seekers whose legal protections had already been significantly reduced under changes to Australia's migration laws. The controversy eventually reached Parliament. During Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee hearings, Senators David Pocock and David Shoebridge questioned senior Home Affairs officials about the arrangement. Officials defended the government's position by arguing that Australia did not hold a direct contract with Safe Hands Group. Instead, they maintained that the security agreements were the responsibility of the sovereign government of Nauru, even while acknowledging that Australian taxpayer funding supported the overall operation. Modern operations, South Bank, Newcastle, and Greyhound industry infiltration. While investigators continue examining the club's alleged corporate links, authorities say the Finks have also remained active in violent street-level crime. In March 2025, New South Wales police arrested and charged several senior members of the Sydney chapter over an alleged targeted home invasion and shooting south of Newcastle. Police treated the incident as a deliberate attack rather than a random act of violence, reinforcing long-standing concerns about territorial disputes and the alleged distribution of illicit drugs. But law enforcement believes the club's strategy extends well beyond violence. Another area attracting close attention has been the greyhound racing industry. Throughout 2023 and 2024, the Greyhound Welfare and Integrity Commission, GWIC, in New South Wales, dealt with several cases involving individuals linked to the Finks. In October 2023, GWIC suspended the trainer registration of Nathan Lazarus, a confirmed Finks member who had also been charged with assaulting police. Lazarus challenged the decision, arguing that his alleged gang involvement had not been legally established and that he remained entitled to the presumption of innocence. Gwick rejected that argument, stating that his association with the Finks raised serious concerns about protecting the integrity of the racing industry. Another closely watched case involved Sophie Bilal, an associate of Finks global leader Ali Bilal. Her application to register as a greyhound owner and trainer was refused under the industry's fit and proper person requirements because of alleged links to organized crime. Although her appeal was later successful in February 2024 on technical evidentiary grounds, both cases highlighted ongoing concerns that people connected to outlaw motorcycle clubs were attempting to establish positions inside highly regulated industries where large amounts of cash regularly circulate. Analytical synthesis: the modern outlaw syndicate. The story of the Finks Motorcycle Club is far more than the history of another outlaw biker gang. Since its formation in 1969, the club has evolved from a small group of anti-establishment riders into an organization that investigators say operates across multiple jurisdictions while adapting to constant legal and political pressure. Rather than relying solely on traditional street crime, authorities allege the modern Finks have expanded into corporate structures, exploited legal loopholes, and challenged government action through complex legal strategies, allowing the organization to maintain influence in both illegal and legitimate sectors. One of the club's greatest strengths has always been its ability to adapt. Its public image revolves around Bung, the smiling medieval jester who appears playful and harmless. Behind that symbol, however, investigators describe an organization built on discipline, loyalty, and strict internal control. The 2013 patchover to the Mongols perfectly demonstrated that flexibility. When governments introduced legislation designed specifically to dismantle the Finks, the club responded by changing its identity on a national scale almost overnight. The move forced authorities to restart years of legal work, significantly disrupting ongoing enforcement efforts. Today, the challenges facing the Finks continue to evolve. International cooperation between law enforcement agencies has increased. Encrypted communications have changed the way criminal groups operate. Specialized police task forces continue targeting outlaw motorcycle clubs across Australia. Even so, investigators believe the organization has repeatedly shown an ability to adjust its methods. Allegations surrounding the Nauru security contracts suggest that the club's influence may now extend far beyond the traditional outlaw biker world and into complex corporate networks tied to government-funded operations. If those allegations demonstrate anything, it is that the Finks have consistently adapted whenever new pressure emerged. For more than 5 decades, the club has survived violent gang wars, nationwide police operations, major legislative crackdowns, and internal divisions. And that may be the most remarkable part of its story. The laughing jester known as Bung has never been a symbol of weakness. According to investigators, it represents an organization that has repeatedly reinvented itself, staying one step ahead whenever authorities believed they finally had it cornered. That reputation continues to shape the Finks' presence across Australia today. The club remains associated with two very different worlds. On one side are allegations of sophisticated corporate connections and financial operations. On the other are highly visible incidents of intimidation and street-level violence that continue to attract police attention. One example came on September 4, 2024. Detectives from Victoria Police's Specialist Echo Task Force arrested 7 patched Finks members following a highly public incident along Melbourne's busy South Bank Promenade. According to police, the riders illegally drove heavy Harley-Davidson motorcycles along the crowded pedestrian walkway, placing tourists and local residents at risk. All 7 men were charged with reckless conduct endangering serious injury and driving on a pedestrian path. Police also seized 7 motorcycles, club vests, and a quantity of cannabis from a 41-year-old man from Rosebud. For investigators, the incident served as another reminder that despite decades of police operations and legislative crackdowns, The Finks continue to project an image of public dominance, while remaining one of Australia's most recognized outlaw motorcycle clubs.